Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Nature's Always Right. And today we're going to be talking about grafting, and this is something that I really love to do. It's just so amazing to be able to make your own trees for very cheap. So simply, what is grafting? Grafting is the process of selecting a fruiting stalk and a rooting stalk and combining those together, allowing the tree's healing process to take place, and those two pieces of wood that you combined become one tree, and the fruiting stalk is the tree that it becomes and the fruit that it will produce. So my good buddy Jared at Jared's Rural Food hooked me up with these rooting stock and fruiting stock because we grafted a bunch of fruit trees this year together. And just so you guys know that I'm not an expert at this. This is something I've been learning the last couple of seasons and trying to get better at, and just practicing it every season. I've learned from a lot of really great experts locally here in San Diego, from people who have decades-long experience, people that are in the Rare Fruit Growers. The Rare Fruit Growers is a club I'd highly recommend if it's in your area. I know it's everywhere in California. So this is the rooting stock, and it's pretty obvious since it has some roots here. The reason that you have a rooting stock is this is chosen for vigorous growth and disease resistance. This is the M111 rootstock, and it's arguably one of the better rootstocks, at least here in San Diego. I know that everyone is really fond of this rootstock. The M111 rootstock is only used for apples typically, but I'm not sure, maybe some other palm fruits are possible. Like I said, I am no expert. This is an extremely complex field, arbory and orchardry and grafting. These are very deep and wide subjects, and you can spend your whole lifetime just studying that alone. So here's the rooting stock and the fruiting stock. So this is a pink pearl apple. This is a type of, I believe it's more of a heritage type of apple. It's really beautiful. If you look up pink pearl online, you'll see the flesh has like this pink swirl in there of color, and it's really, really neat looking. So I need to combine these. What I'm going to be doing is called a wedge graft, and I'll be showing you guys exactly how to do the graft so you guys can do it yourself. I am going to be showing you guys some of the best practices that I've learned from people who have been doing this for a very long time. So I hope that I'm doing them justice by the way that I'm teaching this. If there are any real experts that have been doing this for a long time and you have some corrections or suggestions to make this better, please let me know in the comments, because I'm trying to get better at all these different skills that I'm learning, and I want to make sure I'm passing on good information to all of you. You really are only going to need 2 things to do the graft, possibly 3. So you need a knife. Any straight edge knife will work. It just needs to be extremely sharp. So make sure it's nice and sharp when you're doing this. It should be razor sharp. Now people use some different materials, but this is the superior material. It is the best material. I don't recommend anything else but this. This is called parafilm, and it's made from paraffin wax, and it has a lot of stretch in it. And we'll be talking about how you can use that stretch as part of the technique to get a good tight wrap on your graft. Some people will then finish their graft after they've wrapped with this. They'll wrap the green landscaping tape. They'll wrap that around the area where they've joined the graft together. And that's a great technique too. And if you're doing a small amount of grafts, I recommend using the extra green landscaping tape, just because it's a little bit extra security and safety. When you don't want to bump the graft, that could cause damage. It could destroy the graft. And if you have that landscaping tape, it's a little extra protection if you did accidentally bump it, or if these are planted in the ground, or you're moving the pots around, something like that, it would protect them. So when you get your rootstock shipped to you, it's going to come in some sort of bag in the mail, and most likely it'll have wood shavings like this, moist wood shavings. And it's really important that you always keep your rootstock covered with the wet wood shavings so that the roots always have some moisture around them, and this is what's going to keep the rootstock alive. The other thing you need to do is keep it out of direct sunlight. It can have no direct sunlight at all, and the sooner that you graft your tree, the better. After you graft it, you can put it straight into a pot or straight into the ground, or you could let it sit in here for about a day. but you want to get it into the soil as quickly as you can, because once temperatures warm up, the rooting stock will start to wake up, the healing process is going to start taking place, and the graft will hopefully take. Now for the proper storage of the fruiting stock, or scion wood is the other name for it, S-C-I-O-N, and these are cuttings that you take from a dormant tree. So today I'm just talking about deciduous tree grafting, so keep that in mind. So I'm talking about palm fruits, which are apples, pears, and I'm talking about stone fruit, which is avocado, peaches, plums, all of those types of trees. So when you're selecting a fruiting stock off of your dormant tree, you're looking for calibers that are around, I'd say, like 1/8 of an inch up to 1/4 inch. Somewhere in between these calibers are pretty good. And the reason that I say that is because the rootstock that I've received in the mail is usually somewhere around that caliber. So when you're selecting the match between your fruiting stock and your rooting stock, it's important to look at the calibers and choose a similar size caliber. And you always want to choose a fruiting stock that is slightly smaller than the rooting stock. The fruiting stock should never be larger. And that's because of the healing process and how that works. And I'll be showing you guys that in a moment. Okay, so my next step here that I'm gonna do, I wanna prepare my rooting stock. So I'm just gonna show you guys how to do this very simply and easily. If I was doing a larger batch, like 100 trees, I would alter these steps slightly just because I would bulk task all of these individual tasks that I'm telling you. And also the reason that I only use the paraffin is I find that it is strong enough, and if you're doing a lot of grafting, if you were doing the green landscaping tape on top of this, it's another step, it becomes twice as long, and it would take a lot more time. So large scale nurseries, I believe that they only use this tape. So things to consider when making a cut on the rooting stock. So you need to imagine that all these roots are going to be in a pot. So from the bottom of the roots up, this is where the tree is going to be. So what we're doing is we're planning out the future a little bit. You know, we don't want it too tall, but we also don't want it too short. So, you know, I like to leave around 4 inches is usually pretty good. I think that the longer that you graft and then you raise your trees to be, 3-4 years old, you get better and better at planning out the tree's future. So for me, someone who hasn't been grafting for 5 years, the trees that I've grafted, I haven't been able to watch them mature fully, and my opinion will probably change over time what length I make these. But for now, I'm pretty happy with something that's about here. So let's talk about the healing process and how grafting actually works. Now you guys can go look up some pictures online to really see a detailed view of this. But the reason that grafting works is because there's a layer here in between this outer bark and the inner wood called the Cambium Layer. The Cambium Layer is in between the woody xylem and the phloem. The phloem is the inner part of the bark, and it's basically this layer of cells that exist in between the phloem and the xylem. This may not be a direct analogy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of like to think of it as the Cambium Layer is basically like stem cells. They're kind of like original cells, healing cells that can take on, they can either become xylem tissue or phloem tissue. So that's how I've been thinking about it. You want to make sure that your rootstock's alive. You should see green. And, it's with the camera and everything, it's hard to really see the layers, but the Cambium Layer is essentially, it's that little line. If you can see, there's a small line that's going around the inner circle, about, 1 millimeter from the edge there. That's the Cambium Layer. So what we're doing is we're matching the cambium of the rooting stock with the Cambium Layer on the fruiting stock. So here's the fruiting stock. You can kind of see the edge again down here. It's really defined. Here's what I'm going to use for my fruiting stock and my rooting stock. Hopefully you'll be able to notice that the fruiting stock, the caliber is just slightly smaller than the rooting stock, which is exactly what I want. Okay, so now how are we going to join these? Like I said, we're going to be doing a wedge graft, which is the easiest, simplest type of graft. So I recommend, since we are using such a sharp knife, especially if you've never done this before, to wear leather gloves. So get yourself some nice leather thick gloves and wear them, because I promise you, you will cut yourself. I've cut myself. Everyone I know who has ever grafted has cut themselves. Even professionals cut themselves. So be very careful. I'm going to show you guys without gloves right now, because I want to practice being careful and showing you guys all the correct steps. Hold the graft with your non-dominant hand. Use your stronger hand. Since I'm right-handed, I'll use this one. Now, how you hold the knife is really important. You want to be sure to keep your thumb, you see how it's over the top there? And that's because as you're pressing down, we're going to be pressing down through the center here. As you're pressing down, occasionally the wood will split apart really quickly all of a sudden, and you'll go ship, and then your hand's right there, isn't it? But if you have your thumb over the top like this and it slips, boom, your thumb, it just hits the top of this, so it just lands like this, and then you don't get cut. So that's a really good, safe way to do it. And then also, to be safe, just go very slowly. Don't rush. Slowly work the knife back and forth. So what I'm gonna do is just set the knife on the center here, and then I'm just gonna move my knife back and forth very slowly. And double check that you are going down the center, as close to the center as you can. Okay, I'm just going slow, applying more, just an even amount of pressure, and it's just slowly digging in, boom. So there's what it looks like. So if all of the knife slipped, boom, my thumb holds my finger there, it saves my left hand. Okay, but wear gloves, it's just way safer, it's a little slower. So now we have the fruiting stalk. Now the fruiting stalk, technically, you only need one bud. Okay, you could graft this on, and as long as this bud's alive and that's able to generate and shoot out a branch, it'll work. But we want to ensure, we're taking a lot of time. We paid for this rootstock. We took the time to cut this scion wood. So let's ensure that it's going to happen, and let's give it 3 buds. 3 buds is more than enough to make sure it's going to be okay. Okay, I'm going to cut it right above the bud here. Cutting right above encourages healing. It can heal extremely fast. Okay, guys, so what we have here is our scion cutting. It's very important that we face the cutting the correct way. The buds are always going to be swollen and facing up. This is incorrect, right? There's buds, they're facing down. No, the bud should face up. Now what we need to do is make the wedge cut. So this is the most difficult part of the graft. This is the part that takes practice. I highly recommend that you just practice, take 10 cuttings or more and just practice doing your cuts here. Now I like it when there's a lot of length. There's a bud and then a bunch of length. That's usually pretty nice because you can start higher up. So I'm gonna go flat, and what I'm trying to do is just make a wedge. So there's part of the wedge. I'm gonna flip to the other side. When I'm pushing the blade forward, I'm trying to not go up and down at all, just straight across, straight. The straighter this cut is, the better fit it's gonna have. And this one's not too bad. So here's what I've done. It's decent. So what I'm looking to have is a very thin little wedge like that. You can see there's a little bit of curvature here. That's because I didn't cut as straight as I could have. This edge here is very flat and nice, so that should hopefully go together really well. This is decent, This is like a 7 out of 10, something like that. Now we're gonna combine these 2 pieces together. Okay, and now what I'm gonna do is just shove this in. And I'm gonna try the other side, because I think it'll fit a little better. Okay, so it's looking decent, but I can tell that what's keeping it from being really flush is this side. So this side is still a little wide. They should be even, and that's gonna give you the best fit. This would have worked, I think, but I'm gonna just to show you guys what a better one looks like. We'll take a little more off. Okay, so this is way better. Let's try this again. Nice. That fits so much better. Okay, so that's exactly where I want it now. So now I hope you guys can see that, especially on this left edge here, it's totally in contact with the bark, and actually on this one too. So this became a really good graft. It's making contact on both sides. You only need contact on one side with one Cambium layer. But if you can get both to touch, that's the ideal. That's the, that's the sign of a really good graft if you can get both of them to touch. Okay? And I've got both sides, not all the way down, but it's good enough to work. I ended up at the end with 2 buds. Not a problem. So now the final step, we're gonna wrap this. Now, when you're wrapping it, so I'm just holding it here, I'm down at the bottom. You want this entire wound to be closed. So I'm gonna hold it here, and I'm gonna pull, and I'm gonna stretch a little bit. Now this stretch is the key to the technique. Pull and stretch. Stretch and twist. Stretch and twist. Stretch and twist. Because you wanna get it really tight. The tightness is gonna help hold the graft together, keep it strong so that if we do bump it, it's not gonna break it, and help it fuse together because it's compressing it's compressing the 2 sticks together and helping with the healing. So it's really important to get this tight. Okay, all the way to the very top. Okay, and that's it. So if you were going to use that landscaping green tape, you would wrap again around here and then stop right where the graft ends. But if you do that, you need to remember to remove that tape within a year or less. Once the graft has healed and has fused, that tape needs to come off, because if it's left on there, it'll eventually girdle and bind the tree. The tree will want to expand, but that tape won't let it. This paraffin tape, the wax will eventually degrade, and actually the tree can actually overpower it and break through it. Even the buds, you'll notice I wrapped the buds will break through that and shoot out new growth. So don't worry about that. Make sure it is completely sealed. Okay, if this is an open wound on the tree, if you leave it open anywhere on here, high likelihood it could die. Okay, but let's say you don't have the green landscaping tape, but you want to make it a little stronger, then just, you could put one more layer just around where the graft was made. But if you feel confident in your first wrap, then this is not really necessary. But it's, better to be safe than sorry. It only took me an extra second there. Okay, so there's my pink pearl. The next thing I want to do is just label this. I'll put links in the descriptions to a lot of the different tools that I used and the paraffin tape and all the different things. The best tags are made out of metal and they last forever, and I don't have any to show you, but I'll put a link in the description for them. They're the best tags for long-term things like trees. Okay, so there's my graft. It's totally done. So it's gonna go back into these wood chips and just hang out until I finish the rest of my grafts. And then I'm gonna just put this in a pot. You just plant this in regular potting mix, just as you'd plant any other plant. And then what we're gonna do is wait, and in a number of weeks, eventually these plants will fuse and heal together, and then it'll actually shoot out a new growth that is gonna become a brand new tree. I'll just show you one more time the whole process. So see how long it is? I'll shorten it up. So I just wanna make sure my left hand is far enough away. Okay, make sure the force is coming down on top, not off to the side, directly down. Just a little bit of force, wiggle back and forth. This one's a little harder, so I'm having to oh, see? You see how it jumped like that? That was a perfect example, and my thumb caught it, okay? So now if I would have been back here and pressing down, that could have split and split all the way down till it hit my hand. So that's a wonderful example of why you got to keep your thumb up top. We've got our caliber that's pretty close. I'm actually going to cut a little more off to get up to this bud. Caliber here is a little smaller, and that's what I wanted to go for. The top is already cut and it's brown, which means that it is healed over. It's like a scab. So I wouldn't want to cut that again and force it to reheal. I'm just going to leave that alone. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 buds. I'm going to cut that one off when I make the wedge cut. Okay, so once again on the wedge cut here, if I have a bud at the bottom, I kind of like to go at it and cut it off. Because if you go here, when you cut, sometimes, I don't know, there's weird shapes that get created by the bud. So I like to make sure that's the end is just kind of gone. So when you start the cut, you want to put it at a very slight angle. I'm going to slowly take a little bit off. You know, try different methods to see what works better for you. Take a few cuts off, switch to the other side. Or if you're really good, do a couple cuts on each side and you're done. But I'm not that good. Oops. I took too much off on one side, so I had to come and take more off the other side. And it's not easy. So we still got too much wedge. I want to make it a little bit less. But going little by little, you'll eventually get to the shape that you're looking for. This is looking nice. You can go like this if you're trying to just take a very small amount off. Okay, that wedge is looking thin enough. And both of these are looking fairly flat. Shove the scion in here. One really important thing to mention, this is flush right here. The cambium layers are touching on that edge, so when they're touching, they can both combine and then heal, and then it'll fuse together. You'll notice that the cut here, it's a little wavy, so it's not really touching. So that's not going to heal. But this side will make it. And that's all we need is one side. The other side isn't touching at all. The cambium layers aren't matching up, so there's no chance of this healing. But that's okay, that's normally what we're looking for, and that's what's going to happen when the fruiting stalk is a smaller caliber than the rooting stalk. The only time you'll match both is if the calibers were identical, which does happen sometimes, but it's pretty rare. You don't want the fruiting stalk to be sticking outside, so the fruiting stalk should always be smaller. That's what I was always taught. Okay, this is flush, it will heal. Okay, last step, wrap it again, and remember it's all about the tension that you get in there. So stretch, wrap a little bit. Stretch, wrap, oops, hold on to it. And then, you know, as you get better, you can just hold it. You can hold the actual tension that stretches it while you're twisting it. And I guess that's the more advanced version of it. It's really hard on your finger muscles. See, I just pulled too hard. So that's one thing that's a little bit trickier about doing it that way. When you're starting out, I think it's good just to kind of pull the tension, wrap it, pull the tension, wrap it, pull the tension, wrap it. And then it's gonna just ensure that you're getting a really tight, snug taping on this thing. And as you get better, then you can try the full-on twisting and not screwing around technique. But it sure does tire your hands out. Okay, I want to wrap the top as well. I'm going to go through and just make sure it's fully sealed by squeezing. And that's it. So the final step is just to plant these. And I'm just going to plant them so that all the roots are buried. Just be careful not to knock or, bump your graft. Okay, now you want to keep these out of direct sunlight. Once they bud out, which should happen within a month, if the graft is going to take, I will start to notice it bud out and it's going to wake up. It'll be really delicate at that point, so you don't want to have it in direct, super hot summer sun. So keep it under a tree, keep it under a shade cloth. I'm going to keep it back here underneath these shrubs, and that should be a good spot for them. And then just keep them moist. The soil shouldn't be overly wet. So a little after 1 month is when I grafted and put these in the pots here. And check these out. So these were successful. These two were successful. This one didn't take, but not all grafts take. And this is actually a weird year for grafts. I heard a lot of people were having problems with their grafts taking. A possible reason for that is because our winter was very strange this year. We had almost 90-degree weather in January, I think it was, and then it went back to cold and we never got very good chill hours to begin with, and things are just taking all the stone fruit is taking a lot longer to wake up. So a lot of different variables going on, but yeah, I'm happy with these two. So I got 2 pink pearls. Maybe this Gordon will wake up, but we'll see. It should have woken up already. This one, probably not successful. It almost looks like there's a bud forming inside of this thing, but we'll see if it actually happens. So, but anyways, looking at these guys, check it out. So you'll notice there's 2 different types of leaves here. Now these bottom ones are coming off the bottom. Now this is the rootstock, if you remember. And then we grafted in this top little piece. So this is the fruiting stalk, and this is what the tree will actually become. This tree will become a pink pearl, and it has an M111 rooting stock. That's an apple rooting stock. So eventually what I'm gonna do is cut these off. And I just wanna see some better growth coming off the graft here, getting it more established, more healed. And in talking with a farmer friend of mine, Jared, he thought it was better just to leave these on here for a while because at least it's gonna, photosynthesize and send more energy down to create more roots, which is gonna help the plant heal and grow and everything. So keeping these on here a bit longer, I think, is a good idea. So that's what I'm gonna do. All right, guys, so my trees are finally ready to trim up here. So what you're seeing down here, this is really important. There's 2 things growing here. Now, one of them is from the rootstock, one of them is the actual graft. And just by looking really quickly, you can see that this branch is coming out below here. This right here is where the graft was connected. So anything below that point would be from the rootstock. So I've got to remove that. This is what we're going to leave alive, and is what will become this pink pearl. Whenever you're pruning a fruit tree, you always want to prune as close to the trunk as possible. When you trim right at the collar there, it stimulates the plant to release hormones that cause healing. This is where the graft took. There. And then this branch that I'm wiggling, that is from the rootstock. And this one here. And what we're left with is a successful graft. And this is so fun because you can actually see where the graft came out of. Right there is where the bud forms. So every winter, when you see your dormant fruit tree, those little buds, that is where the new growth point comes out. And that's where the new tree grows out of. So pretty cool. It's getting really hot in the next couple days. It's gonna go up to 95. So I think I'm actually gonna throw these guys in the shade just to keep them a little bit more protected since they're so young and just they can't take too much stress. So I'm gonna put them in my little shade structure over here. And then that's it, guys. That's it for this grass. There's been successful. Now I just gotta keep them alive. I can plant them as soon as it's planting season in San Diego again, which will be once the heat is over. We have a little planting window in the fall. It's not the most ideal time. The spring would be the most ideal, or the winter before they wake up. But anyways, I'll keep these guys alive for the next year, and we'll see if I can find a cool place to put them. All right, guys, I hope you found that helpful. If you have any more questions about grafting, ask in the comments. In the future, I'll be doing a lot more detailed videos about stuff like this. So if you're interested in learning more about topics like this, let me know. I hope that what I did is sufficient, and I know that the tips that I gave you should help you have a successful graft. As I said earlier, yeah, if there's anybody who's got a better way to do it or recommendations, please let me know. And yeah, have a great day, guys. Happy grafting. Happy tree planting this spring. And I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.